Welcome to TinyBox Dialogues. Today we are speaking with Marcus Steinhauser. Marcus co-founded Testbirds in 2011. He's responsible for global operations as well as product management and believes in a future where companies follow their purpose rather than their valuation. Marcus, that's a unique perspective, but please share how you ended up here.
Roshan, thanks for inviting me. Yeah, so we started Testbirds back in 2011, and basically what we're trying to achieve is better digital products, creating better digital products together with our clients, right? And how we do that is we have a lot of users who we ask about their opinions to test digital products and to give us feedback so our clients can optimize their digital products. I'm responsible for our product delivery, so we basically have a lot of clever people internally who work with our clients and our testers to run those projects and gather all of that feedback that they're after. And I mean, to be honest, personally, I was never even in touch with things like customer experience or user experience prior to Testbirds.
Really?
Yeah, so my background is more in communications, but since we started 10 years ago, I've really become passionate about it because it's something that is very important, and it's kind of a back in the day it was called a USP, but nowadays it's more kind of a multitude of USPs that you need in order to be successful, and that's an important one of them.
I think it's a standard operating procedure these days, isn't it? You've got to be good at your customer experience and UX, which we're going to dig into. And I want to start with the most I guess, well-known aspect of it, which is customer experience. We hear a lot about customer experience, but back in the day, it was all about the storefront and the customer service representative behind the counter, right? That was the topic back then. Now it's a customer journey from beginning to end. Is looking up a business online, delivery after you've ordered the product, the aftercare, the advocacy. So tell us why. And actually, I have a great statistic I can share before I ask that question. There is 2/3 of companies compete apparently based on customer experience, which is interesting to me because not everyone provides the greatest customer experience, but 73% of customers agree that it is the experience that drives their buying decision. So why does it matter so much, and why are people really not making that connection that this is how you win a customer?
Yeah, I mean, it matters so much because it could be the last touch point that you have with your customer, right? And it's really hard to imagine that's how it is, but that's the reality. And I think
like your first point of contact could be your last point of contact. Is that what you mean?
It could be the first, yeah, but it could also be, you've had a customer for 5 years or even 10 years, and then they have an experience that they really dislike. And what changed in the past 5 or 10 years is that there's so much offering out there that you can very easily switch to another provider or another company, and the effort for that is much lower maybe than to solve the problem that you have. And that's, I think, what we have to understand is that customers are looking for the easiest way to solve the issues that they have. And if they encounter something that they feel they cannot overcome easily, they will just move on to the next one because there's so much out there.
We're really used to that. It's hard to believe that 20 years ago, we would have dial-up service, but now if something doesn't operate fast enough, we really notice it because we're used to that level of service, right? I think I also read that like 80% increase of revenue for businesses who get customer experience right. But then that means that obviously there's 80% that are losing that revenue at the same time, right? But let's dig into your expertise, which is really about that user experience. The core component of the journey, not so new anymore, is the digital component, right? The user experience. Now, they're often the customer experience and user experience described as two separate entities, and I don't really get how that's possible. So it seems impossible to separate the two, doesn't it?
Yeah, they're very similar. And I think user experience is a little bit maybe older than customer experience. So customer experience has come around only in the last couple of years. And it's kind of changed in the sense that user experience actually was meant to explain or describe the whole experience we have with a brand even. So not only with the product, but with the whole brand from A to Z. But because we're talking so much about usability and using digital products, it has evolved into something that is more focused on a single interaction point, or maybe a single journey that I have with a product, but not the total experience. And that's why customer experience, I think, is so much up and coming, because it's meant to encompass everything. Everything. Using a website, having a call with customer service, watching an ad online or on TV. So I think the easiest way to describe it, or how I think about it, is that user experience is part of the customer experience, and focus maybe on a smaller journey within your interaction, where customer experience encompasses everything.
I think that's exactly how I used to think of it. It's, to me, the user experience is the technology component of it, or the digital piece of it, of how I'm interacting with that brand online. Whereas customer experience to me has always been about that one-to-one. I worked in customer experience in banking. So for me, it was always about when you talk to a person. But of course, that's changed as well with chatbots and, automated messages and things like that too, hasn't it? Simply the website taking too long to load means 40% of the people will leave the website because they can't be bothered to wait anymore, because we're not used to waiting, right? And I wanted to ask you about with your testing, because we often forget about the mobile aspect of it. And I read that people are 5 times likely to abandon a shopping cart if the user experience is not optimized for mobile. Do you also do testing on website and mobile interlinked, rather than like seeing it as one journey and one process? Or do you end up seeing it, do your customers end up seeing it as 2 separate journeys?
I mean, ideally, it's seen as one journey in the end, because you don't know what the customer will be doing, and they might switch actually from mobile to desktop, or vice versa, because something comes up, right? So what we do quite often is when we test these things, we have multiple setups where some people will go into the mobile journey, some people will go into the desktop journey, and then we compare them in terms of, how easy is it to complete the checkout process, or what obstacles came up. And I mean, I think mobile is trickier because you have a smaller screen and you need to put everything on there, while the experience should be very similar. So it depends a little bit how the customer also is set up internally, because maybe mobile will be done by a different team compared to desktop. And then
do you find that? That seems surprising to me, that you would have 2 different teams.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, wow.
And then depending on how much they're aligned, right, also the journey might look a little bit different, and then your customer experience will look differently as well. And maybe that can be a challenge. So ideally, you have a strategy that kind of filters down into the different channels that you have, and then the experience also is very similar on different channels.
That's very interesting, because I just recently relaunched a website, and then I went to check it on mobile. And I just felt like I was scrolling for ages just to get through the home page. Whereas on the screen, on the desktop, it was fine. On the mobile, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get to the end of this page. So that's really interesting. Now, I think we should talk about the bonuses of getting this journey right. So if you overcome the challenges of matching mobile to desktop and making sure that the experience is aligned, the benefits are really multifold, aren't they? Like, what would you describe as the outcomes and benefits your clients see when they get the journey right?
Yeah, I mean, quite often it's very specific things that they're after, right? So it's maybe increasing a conversion rate, or boosting revenues, or maybe even something like customer satisfaction ratings or NPS scores that they're measuring. But I mean, what it all comes down to in the end is that you have a satisfied customer, right? And a happy customer will buy more, they will stay a customer, and they will also tell their friends about their experience in ideal case. And that's the best case scenario that you can achieve. So I think how you measure it is an interesting question, because different teams will measure it differently. But what it all comes down to is that someone stops the journey, or is at the end of their journey, and they will kind of maybe even have a smile on their face that, that was actually nice, because it was a little different, or it was surprising how they handled this, not just how everyone else does it.
I love that, because one of the things that we used to say at one of the banks I worked at was that every disappointed customer is actually an opportunity to exceed expectations. If you turn that around, they're more likely to tell 20 other people that you did that, rather than continually just, never see it as a bad move. It's actually an opportunity that you can wow them. Like you say, get the smile on their face, right?
Yeah. And I mean, quite often it's really the little things, right? It's not, you don't need to have a huge, I don't know, a team that comes up with big ideas. It's little things like unwrapping a package and there's a little note in there that has a personal message on it. That was very uncommon maybe 3 years ago, and nowadays we see that quite often. And so now you need to come up with something else that not everyone is doing. So you have this kind of surprise element in your process or in your journey.
Do you think that was because, like you say, this is a recent thing where we add these personal notes, but it almost seems like we've moved past the convenience of having a package shipped to our door to wanting it to be a special feeling when you get the package, right? Because before it was just get it there fast. And now we're seeing that people don't mind waiting a couple of weeks to get something if it's beautiful and they, and the quality is good and they get this personal note with it. Do you find the same, or when you're doing your testing?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing quite a bit of also shipping and unboxing, and although we're usually focusing on digital products, that's also part of the journey, right? So you're ordering something via a website or maybe an app, and then you receive the package. And we had, for example, a test recently where the client was very much looking at, actually did video recordings of the unwrapping of the boxes.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Okay.
And the testers kind of opened it, they had a look at it, and they rated their experience afterwards. And it was very interesting because the testers were quite happy with the unwrapping and with how it was packaged, but the client was like, "Oh, this is wrong, and this is wrong. This is actually different," right?
Yeah.
So it's also interesting because you might have a certain, standard, or you define certain criteria how things need to be, but the user perceives it very differently. For them, it's maybe great the way it is, but you would consider it as bad or failed, right? So that's why it's also very important to have these maybe reality checks or get this feedback from actual people, because maybe you can even save some time. Or money,
and not perfect a system that's already actually impressing your customer.
Exactly. Yeah.
I get that. One of the other things that you mentioned just now was boosting conversion rates, but I read some statistics on this. I've been really researching before our chat because this is a passion project of mine, and I read somewhere that 70% of small businesses don't even have call to action buttons. And so I just find it funny that you mentioned the boosting the conversion rates. If you don't even have a call to action button, do you find that a lot in your testing? Are people missing these calls to action, these quick hits, or this one company that I was buying from, I had to go through 5 different screens. They'd already made the sale, but because of the process of getting to the final button to pay, I almost abandoned the cart because I'm like, God, this is taking forever. So, so either they don't have the call to action button or they have 5 steps through their call to action. Do you find that a lot, or?
Yeah, maybe not so much do they have a call to action button or not, but is it at the right spot? Does it have the right name, right? Yeah. Are you at the stage in the buying process where you want to press that button, or do you actually need more information before, or maybe there was too much? So I think that's where most companies or teams struggle, because every user is also different, right? And you might have someone who did a lot of research prior to actually wanting to buy it, and they don't need any information, they just want to go and buy. And then you have someone who needs a lot of information. They want to have, I don't know, security that what they're buying is exactly what they want. And then you need a different journey for those people. So ideally you have, different routes that people can go along, so for the different needs that they have. Because if you only have one and everyone needs to go through the same one, then you have a problem. 90% will have different needs.
Interesting. When websites first came out, I always remember that the big thing was banner ads. And I was just laughing about that, because that was often something that put me off websites, because they'd always have these banner ads and these flashing ads. And I think, the chances of you clicking on a banner ad is, you're more likely to climb Mount Everest by 280 times than clicking on a banner ad, because it's just so annoying. Do you find that that's still a component that gets in the way of the accessibility and usability of websites that you're testing?
Yeah, I think also the ad blockers that came up some years ago have have
Have
changed
helped.
that quite a bit, right? They helped the users, yeah, because they had an issue, right? The only time you click on it was basically by accident, and you open up a new tab and then
Yeah.
want to go back. So there was a real issue that people had, and it was solved by an external tool, basically. But it led to a lot of companies then changing how they advertise. And I think we went from the the 90s and 2000s with the flashy colors and ads, and also
I showed my
sounds,
age there then,
right?
didn't I?
Yeah, but you even had like sounds, right?
Yeah.
Speakers going off, and we went to, okay, which ads should be shown to which user at what point in their journey,
Right.
and what have they done before. So there's a lot more tracking going on, and you know a lot more about what the user, which touch points they've had in the past. So you can show them maybe an ad at the point in time where they're ready for it, and they might then be interested in it, because it's not just a flashy icon, but it has content maybe in it that they're looking for. So if you look at the Google search results, right, the top is always ads.
Yeah.
But I clicked on them quite often because they usually match what I'm looking for, and that is how it should be.
Yes, absolutely. Like it's actually what you wanted, not some random thing that's been paid for that's just showing up at the top. I actually used to scroll right past them, to be honest, because I thought, well, that's just advertising. Like it's not going to serve my needs. And now you're absolutely right. They're much better because of the analytics that have taken place, that they're matching it much more accurately. Yeah, you're right. I'd love for you to share a success story with us that you've experienced through your company of where, they really got it right, or you were able to help them get it right. Is there a story that you can share with us on that?
Yeah, so one I usually like to tell is a client of ours who builds applications also for motorcycles, right? And they had the issue, they having customers worldwide, different time zones, different climates, and they're developing an app that people are using all over the world in all of these different circumstances. And it's being developed out of Germany and Europe. And what they were after is, okay, how can we integrate those users into the process so we know actually how they use it and what's important to them, or where should it go? So we've built this community basically of motorcyclists, very people usually, and they test on a continuous basis new prototypes or new releases that are coming out, sometimes even physical products that you can kind of put on your motorcycle. And I think it's helped quite a lot both ways. It created this group of people who is very, very kind of advocates for the brand, right?
Yeah.
Because they're involved in the process and they feel like they can change something.
Yeah.
And the company itself, they have a lot more insights into how users are using their product, and they can integrate that into the process, so it's much closer to the user needs. And essentially, you're not only testing, one checkout process, but you're testing a whole journey where someone downloads an app update, they plan a route maybe for the weekend, they check the weather forecast, they hop on their bike, they drive for a couple of 100 kilometers, they come back, they download the route again, they share it with their friends. And that's like a whole experience also that
amazing.
has so many different touch points. Right?
Well, I like a couple of things about that. Like one of the things is this feedback loop, right? This continuous improvement. That was something that Airbnb and Uber started putting in place, where not only were you rating the host, but they're able to rate you and vice versa, right? And this continuous loop also means that you're kept in check. Same thing with Uber. And what I like about that is that I have a couple of experts that we talked about customer centricity. And people in organizations, and maybe you can confirm this for me, they seem to do this check-in with customers maybe once a year, or through NPS score once in a while, but there's not a continuous loop. And that's kind of what I like about your example, is that it isn't, because often we design things and they're not used the way you intended by the customer, right? They use it for something else, or they adapt it. And so I really like this idea that there's this continuous improvement of feedback loop. Do you find that organizations are really missing this, and this is why it's your favorite example? Because it does seem to me people are talking about customer centricity, but how do you know if you're not asking continuously? And you create communities. I also want to come to the community aspect too, but this continuous loop, let's address that first. Is this something that you see very rarely, or?
I think it's happening more and more, but I mean, if we're being honest, it's also very hard to do it right, because it's a lot of effort and it needs to be kind of integrated into your company, not just in one team, but kind of almost from the top. So it needs to be a priority, right? And then you have also the means to execute the things that you need to do, because if one team does it, then that's nice, but it's kind of a silo thing. So it's really hard to set it up in a way that there's a continuous loop that influences not just one part, but kind of your whole, I don't know, product development or service, whatever you're doing. And more and more companies are doing it. And we're seeing that, for example, because a lot of the people that we're talking to in those companies, the roles have changed quite a bit. So nowadays, you talk to UX research or customer experience consultants and those kind of people. They didn't exist 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot more expertise being built up in those companies because it's becoming a priority, because it's the only way how you can kind of stand out or also compete.
I think it also comes from the fact that we've got so much data. There's so much data. Like every time I speak to somebody, I used to be in people analytics in London, and you know, it seemed like everybody who was in HR has been relabeled people analytics, but without the tools and resources to understand what exactly that means and why it's important, because there's just so much data out there, right? So you need to know which pieces of the user journey or customer journey do you need to look at and review and update, and what role is that? And I like what you say is that they're starting to see that they need those roles within the organizations to understand where they need to change elements of their journey, right? When, you know, one of the things that we realized is that by doing, like you say, a company-wide campaign or a project, then you're able to see, okay, this does need to go into the product area. Like the application form takes too long for that particular piece. And that's the feedback we got from the customer. But as you say, they need to be open to that feedback as well, right? It's not just regulation. It's also like, okay, but the customer's not going to sit through that.
Yeah. And I mean, the challenge is you need both, right? You need to connect the data streams that are kind of coming into different departments within the company, and then you also need to connect the people who know what to do with that data, and then you can do something with it. But it's
train them. But you did talk about community as well, and that's one of the things I really love about TestBirds, because I do know your company a little bit, and I really like this idea that you do find a community of people who are using that particular product or company or whatever it might be to do the testing. So not random people, but people who actually do care. And that comes back to I like this piece that you put in your bio about, you know, it's about purpose, that you need to be making a difference. And isn't that part of creating that community? We're not just taking random people to test your product. We're taking the ones that care about your product and services to then test it, right? Is that an important aspect of why you created TestBirds?
Yeah. So, I mean, what we're trying to do in the end is create these real world scenarios, how products are being used before they're actually on the market, right? And I mean, also, to be honest, quite often the feedback is maybe not so positive, also quite hard to digest for our clients, but that makes it also valuable.
Right.
And I think when it comes to what's the purpose of the company and what's our goal, it's very powerful if you think about your vision or your purpose as making something better, right? So improving something for people or changing something in their life, or even if it's just a tiny little bit. Because if you achieve that, then all of the other stuff like increasing revenues or that will be a result of you having achieved that. But if the focus is increasing revenue, then you will kind of take measures to increase revenue, but not so much to make something better for your customer, maybe. Or it's not the same, at least. And it's a very big difference, but it's kind of how we know companies work, right? In the past, that's everything that we look at.
I got to tell you, I jump for joy every time that I actually get a real person when I have a real problem with any product or service. I'm like, oh, thank goodness, a real person has emailed me or is answering the phone. because sometimes you get stuck in this cycle of click here for help or click here for the answer, and then you end up back where you started. And I think you're absolutely right. It really is something that companies are paying far more attention to as well. One of the things that really jumps out at me is, you know, if we think about predicting the future, rather than predicting what customers want, ask them. And that's really what you guys are doing, is you're testing and asking them so that they don't need to guess. You can get the answer, right? So how do you see this playing out in the future? How can companies stay ahead of the competition and really do this, other than, of course, using test birds?
Yeah. Maybe one small addition also to what you just said, which is totally correct. You need to ask people, but you also need to watch them. There's two elements that need to, I think, go together, because people will tell you one thing sometimes, but actually need something else, right? So it depends on the case. So sometimes it's enough if you ask them to tell you that's what I need, but sometimes also you need to watch them and interpret kind of what they're doing. And we're trying to do both in our work.
I have to say, that's a funny one that you may jump out. A colleague of mine once said, if you ask somebody, do they like Adam Sandler movies? They'll say no, but he's one of the most watched on Netflix. So actually their actions show you that he is popular. So that was a great moment. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, because you got social pressure going on, and, you know, biases and everything. But those are very two important things. And then coming back to your question, which was, how can companies stay ahead of the
competition? Yeah.
I mean, I think we mentioned a lot of the points already. So I'm going to steal something from Stephen van Berghem that did a talk recently for us, and he said that companies need to become friction hunters, right? And
interesting.
So basically, try to remove the friction that you have in whatever you're trying to achieve. So I want to buy a pair of shoes. I'm going to do that where I have the least friction in order to do that. Or I have a problem with my phone that I need to solve with my contract. And usually there's a lot of friction in these cases because you cannot get a hold of someone. So I think, creating, it's like user centricity, you mentioned this before, is very important. And kind of, maybe if we want to name a couple of things that people can do, is we need to start thinking in journeys or in experiences, and less in individual touch points, or maybe even individual teams that are doing certain things. So start thinking in whole processes, and then you can kind of adapt the journeys that you're offering to clients from a big picture view, and not only 1 or 2 and 3 and 4 individual.
That's a big departure from how we used to do customer experience, because it always was about the touch points. And in fact, even recently I heard the statistic of, you know, you need 7 touch points with a customer before they're, you know, you get them into the buy. And I really think you're right. It's about the full experience, and that experience can start with them seeing a post about you, or seeing your brand online, or a tweet about you. Like, it really can start anywhere. And from that point, that's your starting point, right, of the user journey and the customer journey. So, and I like this, you know, they're not interchangeable, but they are deeply linked, right? So, because we are going to see brands online before we see them live in stores or anything else. And it might be somebody talking about them. So are you going to have advocates, or are you going to have people who aren't talking so well, right? So do you test as well from, we're going to run out of time, but I really want to ask you, do you test as well from that aspect? Is it purely website mobile, or do you also look at, hey, how are people viewing you on other platforms, and where are they talking about you?
I mean, that can also be part of the process, yeah. So especially if you're thinking about maybe launching a new product and you want to get some insights into what people are expecting from you as a company, then it makes sense to just do some market research and ask people, what do they know about this? So quite often clients are also requesting people who have never had any touch points with them as a brand, right, in order to kind of get a fresh perspective from future customers.
Oh, fantastic. I love that. And again, it comes back to purpose. What is the purpose? What is the goal of what you're trying to achieve? And if it is product development, maybe that's the best way to go about it. Is there any final thoughts before I wrap this up? It's been a fun session because this is one of my passion projects, but is there any last thoughts that you want to share with our audience?
No, not really. I think
No, you're good. You covered it.
Yeah, we covered everything.
All right. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much. And if you have not had your UX tested, like me, this might be the time, and this is the fellow to get in contact with. The audio will be shared on Spotify, the video shared on YouTube, and the information to find Marcus will be right underneath. So thanks so much, Marcus, for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Thanks so much, Raj. It was fun. Bye-bye.